The year was 2347, and humanity had finally reached the stars. After centuries of dreaming, building, and pushing beyond every limit, the people of Earth had spread across 3 distant worlds. They had built cities on dead planets, turned barren moons into gardens, and learned to call the cold darkness of space their home. Captain Daniel Hayes stood on the bridge of the deep space vessel Wanderer, watching the stars drift slowly past the view screen. He was a tall man with gray at his temples and lines around his eyes that spoke of too many years making hard decisions. The Wanderer was not a warship. She was an explorer, built to map the unknown edges of human space and find new worlds for humanity to claim. "Captain, I'm picking up something strange on long-range sensors," said Lieutenant Kevin Brooks from the communications station. He was young, barely 25, and this was his first deep space assignment. Hayes walked over to look at the readings. "What am I looking at, Lieutenant?" "I don't know, sir. It looks like some kind of energy signature, but nothing in our database matches it. It's big, whatever it is. And it's getting bigger." Commander Lisa Morgan, the ship's first officer, joined them. She had served with Hayes for 8 years and had learned to trust his instincts. Right now, those instincts were telling her something was very wrong. "Should we pull back, Captain?" she asked Doc before Hayes could answer. Space itself seemed to tear open. A ripple of light spread across the view screen, and from that impossible wound in reality, ships began to emerge. Not 1 or 2, but dozens. Then hundreds. Each vessel was enormous, covered in purple scales that shimmered like oil on water. Weapons arrays lined their hulls, each one larger than the entire Wanderer. The bridge fell silent. Every officer stared at the screen, frozen by the sight of something that should not exist. Humanity had always wondered if they were alone in the universe. Now they had their answer, and it was terrifying. "Count them," Hayes said quietly. Lieutenant Amy Peters, the science officer, worked her console with shaking hands. 412 ships, Captain. And more are still coming through." The communications console lit up. Brooks looked at Hayes, his face pale. "Sir, they're hailing us. Put it through." The view screen flickered, and humanity got its first look at intelligent alien life. The creature that appeared was nothing like anything from human imagination. 6 eyes arranged in a circle stared out from a face that had no clear front or back. Tentacles drifted around its body, some solid, some seeming to fade in and out of existence. Its skin was covered in crystals that pulsed with inner light. When it spoke, the ship's translator struggled to keep up, producing words that were flat and mechanical but carried unmistakable meaning. "Primitive vessel. You have entered space claimed by the Velthari Dominion. You will surrender your ship and submit to integration. Resistance is not logical. Resistance is not possible. Resistance is not possible. You have 1 rotation of your home world to comply." The transmission cut off before Hayes could respond. Morgan turned to him. "Captain, what do we do?" Hayes looked around the bridge at his crew. These were good people. Scientists and explorers who had signed up to discover new worlds, not to fight wars. But they were also human, and humans had never been good at giving up. "Peters, what can you tell me about these ships?" The science officer studied her readings. "Their technology is far beyond ours, sir. Those weapons could destroy us before we even knew they had fired. Their shields are unlike anything I've ever seen. And that thing they came through, that tear in space, it's some kind of faster-than-light travel we can't even begin to understand. Numbers? I'm detecting similar fleets across a massive area of space. Thousands of ships, maybe tens of thousands. And that's just what our sensors can reach." Hayes absorbed this information. The situation was worse than bad. It was impossible. Humanity's entire fleet numbered less than 500 vessels, most of them cargo haulers and colony ships. Against an empire that could field thousands of warships, they had no chance at all. But surrender meant the end of everything humanity had built. The end of freedom, of choice, of the right to determine their own future. Hayes had read enough history to know what happened to peoples who surrendered to conquerors. They disappeared, absorbed into empires that ground them down until nothing remained but obedient servants. Brooks, open a channel to Earth Command. Maximum encryption. Yes, sir. Hayes composed his message carefully. Earth Command, this is Captain Daniel Hayes of the Wanderer. We have made contact with an alien civilization calling itself the Velthari Dominion. They are hostile. They are powerful. Their fleet numbers in the thousands, possibly more. They have demanded our surrender and the surrender of all human territory. Sending all sensor data now. God help us all. He nodded to Brooks, who transmitted the message along with every piece of information they had gathered. Now what, sir? Morgan asked. Now we buy time. Hayes straightened his uniform and faced the view screen. Open a channel to the alien fleet. The Velthari commander's image reappeared. Its 6 eyes fixed on Hayes with an expression that might have been curiosity or contempt. You have something to say, primitive? I do. I am Captain Daniel Hayes, and I speak for the people of Earth. We received your message. We understand your demands, but I need you to understand something about us. The alien waited. Humans do not surrender. We never have. When enemies came to take our lands, we fought them. When disease tried to destroy us, we cured it. When our own planet became too small, we built ships and reached for the stars. You may be more powerful than us. You may have ships and weapons beyond our understanding, but you will not take our freedom without a fight. And we have learned that even the smallest creature can bring down the largest if it refuses to give up. The alien made a sound that the translator could not interpret. Then it spoke again. Your defiance is noted. It is also meaningless. When the time expires, you will learn what the Dominion does to species who refuse integration. 12 civilizations before you have tried to resist. None remain. You will not be different. The transmission ended. Morgan looked at Hayes. Sir, did you just declare war on an empire that could wipe us out in a day? Hayes smiled, though there was no humor in it. I bought us time to figure out how to survive. That's all any of us can do right now. He turned to face his crew. Get me everything you can on these Velthari. How they fight, how they think, what they want. Somewhere in all that data is a weakness. And humans are very good at finding weaknesses. As the Wanderer turned toward home, racing to bring word of the coming storm, none of them knew that this moment would be remembered for thousands of years. Not as the day humanity faced extinction, but as the day the galaxy learned that some species refused to kneel, no matter the cost. The Velthari fleet arrived at Kepler's Gate, expecting an easy victory. Fleet Commander Vexthal had conquered 11 worlds in his career and had never lost a single ship to enemy action. The humans, with their primitive technology and tiny fleet, would be no different. His masters had given him 500 warships for this mission, more than enough to crush any resistance. But when his sensors swept the designated area, they found nothing. Where are the humans? Vexthal demanded, his tentacles writhing with confusion. His tactical officer consulted the ship's systems. Unknown, Commander. Their vessels were detected moving toward this sector. They should be here. Find them. The Velthari fleet spread out across the system, their sensors reaching into every corner of space. The Kepler sector was a mess of floating rocks, gas clouds, and radiation from the nearby pulsar. It was difficult terrain for precise scanning, but the Velthari had dealt with worse conditions before. One of the sensor operators noticed something strange. Commander, I am detecting small metallic objects scattered throughout the asteroid field. Thousands of them. What kind of objects? They appear to be primitive communication satellites. Very old technology. Perhaps the humans left them here as observation devices to record the battle. Vexthal's scales rippled with amusement. They want to watch their own defeat. Let them. Continue the search. The first satellite exploded as a Velthari destroyer passed within range. The blast itself was tiny, barely enough to shake the massive ship. But the electromagnetic pulse that came with it was something else entirely. It ripped through the destroyer's electronic systems, scrambling sensors and burning out communication arrays. Then another satellite exploded. And another. Within minutes, hundreds of the small devices were detonating all around the Velthari fleet, filling space with waves of electromagnetic interference that blinded sensors and cut off communications between ships. Vexthal watched his carefully ordered fleet dissolve into chaos. Ships that had operated as a single unit suddenly found themselves alone, unable to see or talk to their companions. His tactical display flickered and died, replaced by static. What is happening? He shouted. No one could answer him. No one could hear him. That was when the human fleet emerged from behind the gas giant. Admiral Patricia Coleman led the attack from the bridge of the carrier Resolute, watching as 60 human vessels screamed out of hiding toward the scattered Velthari ships. They were outnumbered almost 10 to 1, but the aliens could not coordinate their defense. Each enemy ship had to fight alone, responding to attacks it could barely see. All ships, execute attack pattern Delta, Coleman ordered. Hit them fast and keep moving. Don't let them recover. The human ships scattered like a flock of birds, each vessel operating independently but with a shared purpose. They were smaller than the Velthari warships, faster and more nimble. In the chaos of the electromagnetic storm, their size became an advantage. Captain Hayes commanded the Wanderer in the heart of the battle. His ship was never designed for combat, but his crew had worked for days to arm her with every weapon they could find. Now those weapons fired again and again, targeting the weak points that human scientists had identified in the Velthari designs. Their shields can handle concentrated fire, Hayes explained to his tactical officer, but they're not designed for attacks from multiple angles at once. Hit them from 3 sides, and their systems can't compensate fast enough. 3 human ships swarmed a Velthari cruiser, their weapons striking from above, below, and behind simultaneously. The cruiser's shields flickered and failed, and a final shot from the Wanderer struck its engine core. The massive ship exploded in a ball of fire that lit up the darkness of Space. Commander Morrison's fighter squadron screamed through the battle, their small craft darting between the giant enemy vessels like insects around elephants. But these insects had stingers. Walsh, take your wing and draw fire from that battleship, Morrison ordered. Keep them busy while the bombers hit their weapon systems. Pilot Jennifer Walsh pushed her fighter into a spinning dive that took her directly toward the enemy ship. Weapons fire filled the space around her, but she was moving too fast and too erratically for the Velthari targeting systems to track. This is insane, she shouted over the radio. Keep doing it anyway. Morrison shouted back. The bombers came in behind her, their heavy weapons finding the gaps in the battleship's armor that Walsh's attack had revealed. Secondary explosions rippled across the enemy hull as ammunition stores and fuel lines ignited. The battle raged for 3 hours. The Velthari fought hard, but they were fighting blind and alone. Their perfect formations had collapsed. Their mathematical precision had become useless. They were facing an enemy that did not fight according to any rules they understood. When Fleet Commander Vexthal finally managed to restore communications with his surviving ships, he learned the terrible truth. 63 Velthari vessels had been destroyed. The humans had lost only 12. it was the first defeat that Dominion had suffered in over 2,000 years. Impossible, Vexthal whispered as he stared at the damage reports. This is impossible. But the proof was floating all around him. The wreckage of the mightiest warships the Dominion had ever built. Destroyed by a species that should have been nothing more than a minor obstacle on the path of conquest. Admiral Coleman stood on the bridge of the Resolute, watching the Velthary fleet retreat into the distance. Her face was tired but triumphant. They had won. Against all odds, against every logical calculation. Humanity had won its first battle against an enemy that had never known defeat. Admiral, her communications officer reported, "We're receiving transmissions from across human space. Everyone is celebrating. They're calling this the miracle of Kepler's Gate." Coleman nodded slowly. "It's not a miracle. It's who we are. We're humans. We find ways to survive." But she knew this was only the beginning. The Velthary would return with more ships, better tactics, and burning anger at the humiliation they had suffered. This victory had bought humanity time, nothing more. Time to prepare. Time to build. Time to find allies in a galaxy that had just learned something extraordinary was possible. The mighty Velthary could be beaten, and if they could be beaten once, they could be beaten again, as the human fleet gathered its wounded and counted its dead. The survivors knew that their war was just beginning. But for the first time since first contact, they believed they might actually have a chance. Hope. It was the most dangerous weapon humanity possessed. And now the whole galaxy was about to learn just how dangerous it could be. The news hit Earth like a hammer. Within hours of receiving the Wanderer's message, every screen on the planet was showing images of the alien fleet. People gathered in streets and homes, watching in silence as their leaders tried to explain what was happening. The dream of meeting other intelligent life had finally come true, and it had turned into a nightmare. Admiral Patricia Coleman stood before the United Earth Council, her uniform pressed and perfect, despite the fact that she had not slept in 2 days. She was 60 years old, with white hair cut short and eyes that had seen too much death to be afraid of anything anymore. "The situation is simple," she told the assembled representatives. "The Velthary Dominion controls over 4,000 star systems. They have conquered 12 other intelligent species. Their military forces outnumber ours by roughly 800 to 1. They have given us 72 hours to surrender, after which they will attack." The chamber erupted in panic. Representatives shouted over each other, some demanding immediate surrender, others calling for evacuation to the outer colonies. Fear filled the room like a poison dot. Then Samuel Grant stood up. He was the representative from Mars Colony, an old man whose hands were scarred from decades of hard labor turning the red planet green. When he spoke, his voice cut through the noise like a knife. "Quiet down, all of you. I want to ask the Admiral a question." He waited until the room fell silent. "Admiral, you're telling us we're outnumbered 800 to 1 against an enemy that has never lost a war?" "That's correct, Representative." Grant nodded slowly. "Good. Then they won't expect us to win. And that means they won't expect what we're going to do." On the colony world of New Providence, Dr. Catherine Bell was already working on exactly what they were going to do. Her laboratory was a mess of equipment, equations, and empty coffee cups. She had been studying theoretical physics for 30 years, dreaming of discoveries that would change humanity's understanding of the universe. Now she had 3 days to turn those dreams into weapons. The Velthary used something called cascade drives, she explained to her team. Her assistant, Dr. Nathan Cole, listened carefully as she drew diagrams in the air with her fingers. They fold space itself, creating tunnels that let them travel faster than light. It's brilliant technology, far beyond anything we can build. Then how do we fight it? Cole asked. Bell smiled. It was the smile of a woman who had just solved a puzzle that others said was impossible. We don't build our own. We break theirs. Their folds create stable tunnels, like roads through space. But what if we could collapse those roads while they're traveling on them? She pulled up a holographic display showing complex mathematical models. Their drives create predictable patterns in the fabric of space-time. If we can generate the right kind of quantum interference, we can make those patterns unstable. Their ships would drop out of faster-than-light travel in random locations. Maybe in the middle of a star. Maybe in the void between galaxies. They would never know where they might end up. Cole stared at the equations. You're talking about making their entire transportation network into a death trap. I'm talking about making them afraid to move. Meanwhile, Commander Jack Morrison was drilling his pilots in tactics that had never been used in real combat. The Valkyrie fought in perfect formations, their ships moving together like parts of a single machine. Human pilots would have to fight differently. Forget everything you learned in basic training, Morrison told his squadron. They were gathered in a briefing room on the carrier Resolute. 30 young men and women who had signed up to fly cargo ships and survey missions. Now they were going to be warriors. The aliens use math to fight. They calculate every move, predict every outcome, and position their ships for maximum efficiency. We're not going to do that. Pilot Jennifer Walsh raised her hand. Then, what are we going to do, sir? We're going to be unpredictable, random. We're going to do things that don't make sense. Because if we don't know what we're doing, they can't know what we're doing either. That sounds crazy. It is crazy. But crazy is the only advantage we have. Across human space, similar scenes were playing out. Engineers worked around the clock to modify civilian ships into makeshift warships. Scientists rushed to understand every piece of data the Wanderer had collected. Soldiers who had never expected to fight anyone, more dangerous than pirates trained for a battle that might decide the fate of their entire species, on Earth. Admiral Coleman watched the preparations with a mixture of pride and worry. Humans were doing what they had always done when faced with impossible odds. They were refusing to give up. They were finding ways to fight. They were being stubborn, creative, and brave. But would it be enough? She was reviewing tactical reports when her aide brought word that Captain Hayes had arrived from the outer system. He looked exhausted, his uniform wrinkled and his eyes red from lack of sleep. But there was fire in those eyes, a determination that the long journey home had not dimmed. Captain, thank you for coming, Coleman said. Your information has been invaluable. Admiral, I've been thinking about nothing else since first contact. The Valkyrie are powerful, but they're also arrogant. They didn't see us as a threat. They barely saw us as people. That's a weakness we can use. How? Hayes sat down across from her. They expect us to fight the way their other enemies fought. Direct confrontation, ship against ship, until we're overwhelmed. But what if we don't fight like that? What if we fight like humans? He pulled up a star chart. The Kepler sector, where we made first contact. It's full of asteroids, gas giants, and electromagnetic interference from a nearby pulsar. Perfect terrain for ambush tactics. We let them come to us, hide our ships in the chaos, and hit them when they're not expecting it. Coleman studied the chart. We'd still be massively outnumbered. Yes, but in that environment, numbers matter less than knowing the territory. We've mapped every rock in that sector. They haven't. We can use that. It was a thin hope. A desperate plan built on the idea that cleverness could overcome power. But it was also very human. Throughout history, smaller forces had defeated larger ones by being smarter, faster, and more willing to take risks. The Admiral made her decision. We'll make our stand at Kepler's Gate. Get me everyone who can hold a weapon and every ship that can fly. If we're going down fighting. As the human fleet began to gather, The Velthari watched from their ships with something like amusement. The primitives were not surrendering. They were actually preparing to fight. It was almost sad, the High Commander thought. Like watching insects try to stop a forest fire. They did not understand that insects could be very dangerous when they had nothing left to lose. They did not know that humans had survived ice ages, plagues, world wars, and the death of their own planet's climate. They did not realize that this strange little species from a small blue world had one quality that no amount of power could overcome. They simply refused to quit, and that refusal was about to change everything. The news of the Battle of Kepler's Gate spread through the galaxy faster than any ship could travel. Traders carried the story from station to station. Smugglers whispered it in dark corners of distant worlds. Slaves serving Velthari, masters passed it along in secret languages their owners did not understand. For the first time in living memory, the Dominion had been defeated. The Velthari High Council gathered in their capital, a massive space station that orbited a dying red star. Supreme Commander Zelvax was the oldest warrior in Dominion history, with scales turned gray by centuries of conquest. He had crushed rebellions, destroyed fleets, and brought entire civilizations to their knees. Now he was watching recordings of his ships being torn apart by creatures he had dismissed as animals. They used garbage, he said, his 6 eyes fixed on the screen. Communication satellites, children's toys compared to our technology, and they turned them into weapons. Tactical analyst Kex then stood nearby, reviewing the data. The humans are clever, Supreme Commander. They took their weaknesses and found ways to make them strengths. But this was one battle. We have thousands of ships. They have hundreds at most. Then, why do I feel afraid for the first time in my long life? Kex then had no answer. Across the galaxy, other species were asking their own questions. The Thornery were sentient plants who had been conquered by the Dominion 800 years ago. They had been forced to grow food for their masters, their intelligence hidden behind a mask of simple obedience. But they had never stopped thinking, never stopped hoping. And now they saw something they had never dared to imagine in the dark forests of their conquered homeworld. The Thornery elders gathered to discuss what they had heard. Their communication was silent. Chemical signals passing through root networks that the Velthari had never learned to monitor. The humans fought and won, the eldest Thornery said. Perhaps we were wrong to submit so easily. We submitted to survive, another elder replied. The humans may have won one battle, but the Dominion will destroy them eventually. Unless they do not. Unless this is the beginning of something new. Similar conversations were happening across Dominion space. The crystalline collective, silicon-based beings who served as the Dominion's engineers began making calculations their masters would not have approved. The Morati, aquatic creatures from a water world conquered 1,000 years ago, started remembering old songs of freedom they had thought lost forever. 3 weeks after the battle, Admiral Coleman received an unexpected transmission. It came through channels that should not have existed, encrypted in ways that human technology barely recognized. Admiral Coleman of the Human Defense Forces. The translated message began. I am Ambassador Velsara of the Morati. We have watched your people with great interest. What you accomplished at Kepler's Gate has given hope to species who had forgotten what hope feels like. We wish to speak with you about the future. Coleman took the meeting in a secure location, a small station on the edge of human space. When the Morati ambassador arrived, Coleman found herself facing a creature from a different world in every way. Velsara looked like something between a dolphin and a squid, with silver skin that shimmered in the station's lights and eyes that held an ancient sadness. Your people have done something remarkable, Velsara said, her translated voice soft and musical. The Dominion has ruled this part of the galaxy for over 3,000 years. 12 species have tried to resist them. All 12 were destroyed or absorbed. The Valkyrie believed they were unstoppable. Your victory has shown them they are not. It was one battle, Coleman replied carefully. We're still badly outnumbered. Yes, but you have something more valuable than ships. You have shown that victory is possible. Do you understand what that means to species who have lived under Dominion rule for centuries? You have given us hope. What exactly are you proposing? Valsara leaned forward, her tentacles spreading in what might have been a gesture of openness. An alliance, not just with my people, but with others. The Thornery have already sent word through their secret networks. The Crystalline Collective has agents who are willing to help. There are more species the Dominion believes are completely broken, who are ready to fight if someone will lead them. Lead them to what? We're barely holding on ourselves. Lead them to freedom. The Dominion is powerful, but they have weaknesses. We know their supply lines, their communication codes, their military rotations. We have been watching and waiting for hundreds of years, hoping for a chance that never seemed to come. Until now. Coleman thought about what she was hearing. An alliance of conquered peoples, united against their oppressors. It was exactly what humanity needed to survive. But it was also a massive risk. The Valkyrie would show no mercy to anyone who helped their enemies. Why us? She asked. Why do you think humans can lead this? Valsara's answer was simple. Because you refused to surrender when surrender was the only logical choice. You fought an enemy that should have crushed you, and you won. You have something my people lost long ago. Something all the conquered species lost. You believe that impossible things can happen. And that belief is the most powerful weapon in the universe. While Coleman was meeting with the Marathi, Dr. Catherine Bell completed her quantum disruption device. It was ugly, covered in cables and producing a constant hum that made everyone nearby uncomfortable. But when they tested it against a simulated Valkyrie Cascade Fold, the results were beyond anything they had hoped. We can shut down their faster-than-light travel, Bell reported to the military leadership. Every cascade tunnel they open, we can collapse. They'll be stuck moving at normal speeds, which means their empire becomes impossible to manage. Ships that could cross the galaxy in days would take years instead. General Christopher Adams studied the data carefully. How long until we can build enough of these to matter? 6 months for working prototypes? A year for mass production. Then we need to hold them off for a year. Adams turned to the strategic display, where Valkyrie fleet movements were being tracked across the sector. They're gathering forces for a second attack. Bigger than before. They want to make an example of us. Coleman's voice came through the communication system. General, I have news. We're not going to be fighting alone. She explained everything Valsara had told her. The secret resistance movements among conquered species. The intelligence networks that have been waiting for a spark of hope. The possibility of turning the Dominion subjects into allies. Adams listened in silence. When she finished, he smiled for the first time since the crisis began. Then let's give them something to fight for. We'll hold the line as long as we need to. And when Dr. Bell's devices are ready, we'll show the Valkyrie what happens when they pick a fight with the wrong species. In the darkness of space, the pieces were moving into place. The Valkyrie were gathering their fleets, preparing to crush humanity with overwhelming force. But humanity was gathering something more valuable. Allies, hope, and the stubborn determination that had carried them from caves to the stars. The real war was about to begin. The Second Battle of Kepler was not a single fight, but a war that lasted 4 months. The Valkyrie committed over 3,000 warships to destroying humanity, more than they had ever used against any enemy in their entire history. They were determined to wipe this stubborn little species from existence and send a message to every other conquered world. But humanity was not fighting alone anymore. The Marathi provided intelligence. There are agents hidden throughout the Dominion sending constant streams of information to human commanders. The Thornery sabotaged supply lines, their ability to survive the vacuum of space, making them perfect for missions the Velthary never expected. The Crystalline Collective corrupted Dominion computer systems, introducing tiny errors that caused weapons to misfire and shields to fail at critical moments. Admiral Daniel Hayes, promoted after his bravery in the first battle, coordinated the defense from the bridge of the battleship Defiant. Around him, officers from 6 different species worked side by side. A Moradi tactical specialist, a Thornery communications expert, a crystalline being whose name could not be pronounced by human tongues, but who everyone called Spark because of the way light played through its body. Velthary fleet is entering the gravity well. Commander Lisa Morgan reported from the tactical station. 3,200 ships, sir. They're using the Stars mast to shield their approach. Hayes studied the display. The enemy had learned from their first defeat. They were staying in tight formation now, their ships protecting each other. They had adapted their sensors to handle electromagnetic interference. They were being careful, but Hayes had spent 4 months preparing for this moment. He had learned things about the Velthary that no human had known before. Their strengths, their weaknesses, and the blind spots that came from 3,000 years of easy victories. They think they understand us now, he said quietly. They think they know what we'll do. Let's show them how wrong they are. He keyed a fleet-wide channel. All ships, execute Operation Icarus. Across the system, human ships began launching what appeared to be missiles toward the star itself. The Velthary sensors detected the launches, but dismissed them as meaningless. No weapon could survive the heat of a stellar surface. They were right. The missiles were not weapons. They were fuel containers, packed with hydrogen and other chemicals designed to burn. When they hit the star's outer layer, they triggered a chain reaction of solar flares that erupted directly at the Velthary fleet. Ships designed to withstand the cold of space suddenly found themselves battered by waves of superheated plasma. Shields that could deflect energy weapons flickered and failed under the assault of a star's fury. The tight formation that was supposed to protect them became a trap. Ships crashing into each other as they tried to escape the fire. They're breaking apart, Morgan reported, unable to keep the amazement from her voice. Their flagship is signaling retreat. Don't let them run. Hayes turned to the Moradi liaison officer. Tell your ships to cut off their escape. Today, we end this. The Allied fleet closed in from every direction. Human ships, Moradi vessels, even a few craft crewed entirely by Thornery, who had never flown in combat before, but refused to let others fight for their freedom. They hit the Velthary fleet while it was still reeling from the solar assault. Commander Jack Morrison led his fighter squadron through the chaos, targeting the massive command ships that coordinated the enemy fleet. Walsh, take your wing and hit that carrier's bridge. Without orders, the rest of them won't know what to do. Pilot Jennifer Walsh had become one of the best combat pilots in the fleet over the past 4 months. She had learned to trust her instincts, to do the unpredictable thing, to be the random element that enemy computers could not calculate. On it, sir, she replied, then pushed her fighter into a dive that should have been impossible. She came in from below, where the carrier's shields were weakest, her weapons firing in a pattern that even she did not plan until she was doing it. The carrier's bridge exploded, and the massive ship began to drift, its crew helpless without leadership. The battle lasted 8 hours. When it finally ended, the Velthary Expeditionary Force had been completely destroyed. Over 2,000 enemy ships drifted as wreckage among the stars. The largest fleet the Dominion had ever assembled was gone. Supreme Commander Zelvax received the news in silence. For a long moment, he said nothing at all. Then he spoke the words that no Velthary had ever spoken in 3,000 years of empire. Send word to the humans. We will negotiate. The treaty was signed 6 months later aboard a neutral station built specifically for the occasion. Under its terms, the Velthari Dominion released all conquered species from integration. They withdrew from human space and agreed to never again attempt conquest of any intelligent species. Admiral Hayes signed on behalf of humanity, but he made sure that representatives from every allied species were present. This victory belonged to all of them. Ambassador Velsara of the Moradi stood beside him as they watched the Velthari delegation leave. Your people have changed the galaxy, Admiral. 1,000 years of Dominion rule ended by a species that should not have survived first contact. Hayes looked out the station's windows at the stars beyond. We had a saying back on Earth. It's not about how big you are. It's about how hard you're willing to fight. And humans are willing to fight very hard, only when we have to. He turned to face her. Now comes the harder part. Building something worth fighting for. Are you with us? Velsara made a sound that the translator interpreted as warm laughter. Admiral, after what we have seen, the galaxy is with you. Every species that ever dreamed of freedom is with you. The question is, what will humanity do with this responsibility? Hayes thought about Earth, about the colonies, about the countless humans who had given everything so that this moment could exist. The same thing we've always done. Survive, adapt, and keep reaching for something better. In the years that followed, the Galactic Federation grew. Over 30 species joined, with humanity serving as its founding member and moral center. There were challenges. Old hatreds did not disappear overnight. Different species had different needs and different ways of seeing the universe. Sometimes peace seemed impossible, but humanity had learned something during those desperate days of first contact. They had learned that the universe was vast and dangerous and full of beings who would see them destroyed. They had also learned that together, anything was possible. Captain Hayes, as he had been on that first day when the Velthari fleet appeared from nowhere, returned to exploring. The Wanderer, rebuilt and upgraded, carried him to the edge of known space, seeking new worlds and new wonders. On the bridge one evening, his first officer asked him a question. Sir, do you ever wonder what would have happened if we had surrendered that first day? Hayes looked at the stars stretching out before them, countless points of light in an infinite darkness. We would have disappeared, just like the 12 species before us. The Dominion would have ground us down until nothing remained but obedience. But we didn't surrender. No, we didn't. Because that's not who we are. Humans face impossible odds and find ways to survive. We turn weaknesses into strengths. We refuse to quit, even when quitting is the only logical choice. He smiled. And apparently, that's not common in the universe, which makes it our responsibility to spread it around. The Wanderer jumped to faster than light speed, disappearing into the endless frontier. Behind it, the galaxy continued to change, shaped by the example of a small species from an unimportant planet, who had done the impossible simply because they refused to believe it could not be done. And somewhere, in the hearts of 1,000 different beings on 1,000 different worlds, hope burned like a star that would never go out. The humans had taught them that. The humans had shown them what was possible. It was the greatest gift humanity had ever given the universe, and it was only the beginning.